So, this is my first attempt at sharing everything I have learned about getting equity in Silicon Valley. So, this is just going to be a thought stream of the project of learning about Silicon Valley, getting to Silicon Valley, understanding Silicon Valley, and earning equity in Silicon Valley. From the outside looking in, everybody focuses on how expensive Silicon Valley is and how intense it can be. And from the inside looking out, those things can be true, but there's an important component that the vast majority of people get left out of when they're having a conversation about how it works. And that is this concept of equity. Now, equity is a term that gets thrown around a lot, particularly with the political discourse today. And it can refer to a lot of things, but for the purpose of this video, what I want to share is how Silicon Valley divides up companies among its employees and how those shares represent equity in the company. There are many terms that are used to explain this process in Silicon Valley. They're called stock options, or restricted stock units, or RSUs for short, or founding team members, or employee equity, employee stock options, or ESOPs. There's so many buzzwords, but essentially what it boils down to is that you own something you work on. And that can be an infinitesimally small piece, or it can be incredibly large. So, what I want to share is about the project I engaged in on learning about Silicon Valley, visiting it, and trying to earn equity. And I did that through a variety of ways. So one of my first experiences with this was coming over to San Francisco to interview at a company called Stripe. Now, Stripe is a payments company that today processes about 1% of the world's payments. So it's about $1 trillion a year that flow through Stripe software. But when I met them, there were about 20 people in an office, and they had about $1 million a day passing through their system. And they had just been offered $1 billion for the company from PayPal. And this was back in 2012. Now, as part of my offer to join Stripe, I was offered some stock options that represented a small percentage of the company. Today, that would have been worth several $100 million. However, because I failed to be a great employee, I did not own those stock options. I did not earn them because of something called a cliff. Now, cliff is a term that is used where the best way I can put it is it's like a gauntlet. We're going to make you work extremely hard for a year and see if we like you. And if we fire you on the day before your cliff, you will get no stock options, which means you will own no equity, which means you will make no extra money on top of your salary. And this is the first kind of most important term to understand when it comes to owning equity, is that Silicon Valley dials up the intensity but rewards you with equity for doing so. The other complicated thing about this system is that it can be very hard to calibrate all of the numbers and understand where you stand. So there can be friends of mine who are extremely bright software engineers and who have incredible mathematical models for physics and functions and computers in their minds, but they get a little bit disjointed when it comes to the nature of the value of their equity. You can think of the shares in the company as just divisions of a pizza. But the thing that can be hard to grasp is that the pizza can expand over time. So as more capital is added, you're not just owning 1% of the company. If the pizza doubles in size, you then own 0.5% of the company. And as an employee, it's very difficult for you to kind of increase that amount of shares to maintain your percentage in the company. So this is where people's intuitions start to break down, because usually a company dies. Sometimes it grows exponentially, but oftentimes in order for it to grow, it has to raise a lot of money. And from the outside in, there's so many numbers flying around, there's so many terms, there's so many complicated aspects to this, that it can seem like a lottery. And many people who criticize Silicon Valley call it the Silicon Valley equity lottery, where some people do fantastically well, but most people don't. And I understand why they say that, because it can seem very complicated. However, I would like to caveat this with one simple observation. Everybody I know who has been honest with themselves over a 10-year period in Silicon Valley has made extraordinary amounts of money from owning equity. That can be from being a founder who failed and then started another business, or who pivoted and changed the business model. It can be from founding engineers who hop from company to company to company. It can be designers who contributed part-time. But the common thread among all these people is that they learnt their lesson over time. And sometimes those lessons can be incredibly painful. I certainly have experienced much of this pain. I have gone into massive credit card debt. I have tried to be a founder and felt that I floundered. I have failed to engage in all kinds of interesting business opportunities. I have been rejected from companies after trying to work there. I have almost lost my visa because all of my team walked out of a company I was trying to build. I have made excruciatingly bad business decisions. I have trusted people I shouldn't have trusted. I have said things on the internet that I shouldn't have said. I have caused myself enormous stress for absolutely no gain. I have had many nights where I was questioning what I was doing. I have been kicked to the curb by a bunch of friendship groups. I have been excluded from all kinds of in-group parties and discussions. And that's just some of the terms that would come to mind when I reflect on a decade of being in Silicon Valley. Now let me flip that on its head, because all of that kind of strain and pushing on reflection feels like training for a marathon. And now my experience has totally shifted, where I know who I can trust, I know how to find people, I know how to help people, and now I want to condense that down and share that with young people who are arriving to Silicon Valley today. The goal here is purely to find more interesting people to collaborate with. There is no ulterior motive. I do not want to charge people anything. I do not want to engage in setting up a fund. I do not want to add any conditions to the sharing of this information. It's just a distillation of an experience, and it's an observation, not a truth. It is just my lens on Silicon Valley, and there are many aspects of it that people could challenge or that people will view as incorrect. But it has proven useful to some of my friends, and so I feel like I want to share it. So one of the most popular things I've ever written is this idea of the alien, the Jedi, and the cult, and the search for those cults. So I believe that Silicon Valley has the highest density of cult-like companies in the world. And it creates an incredible environment for Jedi who have kind of mastered their skills and can engineer and craft and rearrange atoms and manufacture and build and discuss and debate, to go and support these almost messianic alien-like beings who see how the world should be and feel called to go and change it so that it is more like their vision. And searching for those kinds of people before they are well known has been the preoccupation of my entire working career. I have never lasted at a multi-hundred person organization, let alone a multi-thousand person organization. I have never been employed for longer than kind of 8 weeks. I have monumentally failed as a kind of a founding CEO with a modicum of capital. But throughout all of that, I have also been able to help extraordinary people do some quest and, that was involved in their project. So in the case of Stripe, I alerted them to the issue with their mobile bindings, and I hired someone who was much more appropriate than myself to do sales, and that was Lockie Groom. And so those were 2 good things that I did, and that led to fantastic things down the line for me. At Ethereum, I've made a couple of quick designs and helped Gavin prepare a few presentations, and then I moved on. At Reflect Orbital, which is an incredibly exciting space company that's trying to move light around the world at night using gigantic, ultra-thin, compact and expandable mirror satellites, I helped Ben take the leap out of his job and really just provided kind of encouragement for the project. And these are some of the tent poles upon which I could hang my hat and say, I'm proud of these contributions. However minuscule they were, they represented a belief in the person who was creating and a desire and intention to help them further that project. And I think that if I was to kind of leave you with anything from this video, it's this, is that if you help in any way before something becomes obvious to everybody else, there is a way that you can earn a fantastic living in Silicon Valley. So if you join Google and you're run over by a bus before you get to the company, there is going to be nobody mourning you. Nobody will care. And the same would be true if you stayed there for 10, 20, 30 years. There is nobody at Google who would mourn your loss. And that is diametrically opposed to new projects and startups and young companies and scientific endeavors and material science kind of explorations and all kinds of projects that occur in Silicon Valley. If you find something that has fewer than, say, 10 people, for instance, and they want you to help them, and you don't show up in the morning, they should be crestfallen. And I don't care if you are organizing the letters that are mailed to the company or engineering the fundamental physics of the project. If you're there early and you're there giving it everything and you're there trying to help, they will be grateful for your effort. And if they are great people, if they are great founders, if they are great creators, they will reward you for it. And that is my lived experience and observation about Silicon Valley, is that if you are a believer in a creator and you help them before other people believe in them, they will reward you for that. And that can take the form of shares in a company, investment opportunities, tokens, sometimes just large sums of cash has been sent to me by people who have made hundreds of millions of dollars and are just grateful that I helped them. And these things come quite out of the blue. And all this is to say is that I love this flow of gratitude that occurs in the Bay Area. And it can seem a little autistic and acerbic and out of touch when you're not in the flow. But as soon as you become part of the mix, and that can happen intellectually on X and Hacker News, it can happen in code bases online at GitHub, it can happen at conferences and gatherings if you attend in person, it can happen in the hacker houses and communal living situations, it can happen at Burning Man, or it can happen, not at Burning Man because San Francisco is so kind of cleansed during that period. There's so many ways that you can get to be part of the mix and feel yourself kind of centrifugally rejected from it because of the intensity and the rate at which Silicon Valley rotates and spins and tries to edit and mold and reshape things. But fundamentally, I come back to that simple observation, not just about myself, but about everybody else I know who has kind of done one turn of the wheel, or say a decade of their lives there, where they have thoughtfully applied their energy and time to either creating companies or projects of their own, or helping creators further their projects. There is not a single person there who needs to work anymore. They are financially free, but their intellectual curiosity only grows. And that would be the kind of next most important takeaway that I would love somebody to listen to and kind of integrate, is the money is the score for creation. And that the fundamental core of the discussion is not about money when you are joining early. If you're joining Google, you should be pushing them as hard as possible to get as much money and as much kind of value out of that relationship as possible, because you are a serf. You are tilling the land of Larry and Sergey. But if you are joining a brand new project, the discussion is about one of creation and intention and obsession and just industrial levels of focus. It is not about your compensation. And there are many phrases that are thrown around about the kind of negotiation process and how to kind of maximize what you squeeze out of a startup. And I honestly believe that if that is your intention at the beginning of a project, you're probably not suited to the earliest stages. Because I can tell you, at great expense to myself, I have never used a negotiating lawyer or barely signed any contracts with any of my agreements with any of the founders I've worked with. And that has only bitten me once. Every other time it has yielded just an incredible and beautiful relationship that has only got deeper and more meaningful and more magical. And that's such a special thing. It's one of those just magical things when you get to work with somebody who makes it work and wants to work with you. And it's that flow that is not always available to somebody getting on the bus, somebody trying to make ends meet as a waiter or waitress, somebody showing up who doesn't have many skills, somebody doing a kind of coding class and then not really finding a job. Like, the project itself is not going to gift you what you were hoping, because you're not yet at that wonderful kind of fission fusion system that occurs when a bunch of creative people are kind of compressing their minds together and creating new things. And if there's anything to the story of Silicon Valley, it is the unbelievable obsession with the new and the perimeter. And this takes so many different forms, which is what makes the place so fascinating, but so disorientating. So whether it is exploring the perimeter of consciousness with kind of mindfulness and jhanas and meditation and psychology and internal work and psychedelics, or it's the rearrangement of biological primitives and the scientific investigation of different kind of vaccination systems, or the kind of fundamental primitives of the universe, or artificial intelligence and the silicon systems that run it. I mean, just if in any field, if you're looking for depth, if you're looking to go to the bottom of the rabbit hole in your field, and it is in some way technical or scientific or material, you're going to find somebody who just blows your brains out. And if you keep going, it could be a weekly or even sometimes daily occurrence where you're chatting with somebody and you're just absolutely staggered at how competent and deep they have gone. And that fundamentally is what makes the place both restrictive from a kind of broader cultural perspective and addictive to people who are trying to push technical perimeters. And it creates this kind of vibe of disconnectedness from the here and now, where you can kind of step over somebody shitting themselves and screaming at you, and kind of enter an office where somebody has kind of figured out how to make sand think. And so it's such a strange environment where you can be gliding along in a kind of self-driving car, which is just a fundamental achievement in robotics and computer science and software and integrated services and apps and location management and camera technology. But your kind of view is of people bent over consuming fentanyl. And in that way, Silicon Valley kind of stretches you and tears at your sense of self, because there's so much creativity and yet so little humanity visually available to you on the streets of many parts of San Francisco in particular, and many areas around the Bay Area. And yet when you make it inside a single interesting office or studio or design space or engineering workshop or warehouse, you realize what this place is all about. And so you can be vibrating in this paradox of magical creativity and just tragic levels of depravity. You can go from Billionaires Row down to the Tenderloin in really a 25-minute walk or so, and witness just extreme opulence and taste and just disgusting levels of human squalor. But stepping back from it, that extremity, that perimeter, that tip of the spear nature of the Bay seems to have always been true. There's always been people pushing themselves there and pushing themselves too far, and that it acts as this portal where you can kind of shoot up to the world of equity or fall down into the land of fentanyl. And that is the ultimate nature of Silicon Valley's kind of duality, its reality, and its humanity coupled with, I guess, just a total inability to see what is in front of it, where so many people can be so brilliant at helping people online and so chronically detached from the people they walk past. You can see them kind of enter the two-dimensional world and be incredibly useful, but try to kind of pick up a box and put it into a car and just miss the corner and drop it on their feet. And I kind of have so much sympathy for it now, where their two-dimensional grasp of reality is extremely strong and like intense and well formed, but their three-dimensional kind of abilities and kind of empathy is just damaged or non-existent or non-functional. And that is kind of the nature of many of our lives, is that we're on these kind of 2D black planes, these phones and iPads and screens and laptops. We're kind of turning our whole world into this two-dimensional reality. And our grasp of the kind of three-dimensional has just, at times been really lost. We don't gather around a fire and debate a topic. We ratio somebody on Twitter. We don't, have a bust up and, get after it with our fists. We call the police and dismiss people with lawyers. And that is really sad. But it's also the reality. And so in many ways, Silicon Valley is just a hyper-intensification of a reality that we're all going through. We're all staring at something, and I'm coming at you using this kind of set of black rectangles around me. But I'm trying to communicate, I think, this set of things that I've learned and that I feel and that I wish somebody had been able to tell me when I first came to Silicon Valley. And so I cast my mind back to that drive from Los Angeles to Santa Barbara to Menlo Park and dropping Josh Buckley off at his Y Combinator interview, and this sense that this place was going to have an effect on me at a much deeper level. I learned about it in 2 dimensions reading this book, .con, which is .con. I had read all about the concept of Silicon Valley and startups through TechCrunch and Twitter and Hacker News through the Wufoo Form system, which is a company YC backed back in the day. But actually physically showing up, making that pilgrimage and being there, that was different. And I won't forget that. I just won't. It was powerful and beautiful and primal and special and magical and just wow. And as I reflect on this set of observations that come from a past and an existence there, I just thought it would be fun to share all of this, and maybe it will be useful to the young kids who are showing up today with hopes and dreams. And if there's anything that I could kind of leave them with, if there's anything I could just solidify in their mind, is that if you cannot get distracted by the likes, the salaries, the dollars, and the numbers, and if you can just keep your mind's eye on the creation and the creator and the community of creators, if you can draw your mind back to what you are creating and the people who will benefit from your creation, and just center yourself on that each morning, I think you'll just experience Silicon Valley, the video game, on warp speed. And so I'll leave you with that, and I wish you well, and I hope this is recorded perfectly.